Okay, how about sleep regressions? Are sleep regressions normal and are they predictable? Do they happen at certain times?
Yeah. So when we talk about sleep regression, again, this term is like something that we kind of have to define a little bit too, because when we say sleep regression, you're regressing from a certain point. So you've had some good tight, some good rhythms with sleep, and it feels as though suddenly or quite suddenly it can feel like you're regressing. So you're going backwards. Sleep is not as good anymore. So yeah, there are predictable times, even for a solid independent sleeper who's got great sleep habits, where you might see some disruption in sleep. The biggest, most predictable time for this is around the 3 to 5 month mark. A lot of people call this the 4-month sleep regression or progression. But what this is the beginning of the sleep-wake cycle maturation process. So back when I talked about the sleep-wake cycles, at around this time, and typically we see this actually happening a lot more commonly in the 3rd month rather than the 4th month, which is why this term 4-month sleep regression is a bit tricky, where they do start to cycle through these more set sleep-wake cycles where they are becoming lightly awake between cycles. So this is now where you start to see short naps, so cat napping throughout the day, and more frequent wakings overnight, sometimes as often as every 45 to 90 minutes overnight if a baby doesn't know how to fall asleep on their own. Yeah, so that one is a more predictable time. But then anytime a little one achieves a developmental milestone, so typically crawling, walking, big language explosions in the toddler years as well, then we can see sleep regressing a bit. But this one is the most significant time, is around that 4-month mark.
And what about so I have a 6-year-old.
Okay.
We just went to the dentist last week and we found out that she's cutting her 6-year molars.
Oh.
And her sleep has been not as good lately. And I'm wondering if that's part of it.
Did she recently start school or a new environment?
She did. Yeah, she did. Yeah.
Yeah. So typically, when we get closer to the 4 to 6 year mark, so that's my expertise, is 0 to 6.
Oh, really?
So when we get closer to the 4 to 6 year mark, when we have regressions in sleep, they're usually due to some sort of change in the routine in the day. So typically when we start school, even if it's not new, it's just kind of starting again in the new school year, we can see some regressions. Or if anything kind of big happened in their day, some sort of big change happened, moving house or an illness or anything significant, you can see a bit of a change in their sleep. Yeah.
Well, that's good to know and refreshing to know that that it might pass.
It will pass.
And actually, that brings up a good point. I think that's one thing that's really helpful for moms to remember, is that it will pass. It's never. I was talking to Nanny Connie recently, and we were talking about this fallacy of babies sleeping through the night and how it actually doesn't ever really happen, because then you'll have a teething episode or some big change, and then your toddler's having nightmares or night terrors, and then all of a sudden you've got a sick kid who's waking up. So it's never really like you're getting consistently 12 hours of sleep from them every night.
Yeah, and it could happen for a while, and then something else happens, right? So you always got to be prepared for some sort of nighttime parenting at some point, right? Because yeah, even for a great sleeper who sleeps through the night very consistently months on end, well, when they get their first fever or a stomach virus or something like that happens, or they start to get nightmares or night terrors that they get as they get older, you're going to have to attend to them at some point. But what we're hoping for is overall consistency, right? Like we're hoping to get as good sleep as we can possibly get. So that's why we lay down those foundations, so that we can, achieve consistency as much as possible.